Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to another random review. Today's random review is Irreversible by Gaspar Noe, the Argentinian director who I think, myself included, everybody thinks is French, but he's actually Argentinian, from 2002. This is the second feature, which obviously caused a lot of controversy at the time it came out, and next year it'll be 20 years old, and it's still pretty much causing controversy. It's a fairly simple story of a rape that happens and then the revenge for that rape, but because it's shot in reverse, as in the scenes are shot in reverse, not the actual footage is shot in reverse, it's more a revenge rape film, but we'll get to that in a second. This is the new Indicator release, relatively new. It's spine number 200, and it's a landmark release for Indicator in the sense it's the first foreign language release. I know 90 Degrees in the Shade does have a Czech version as well as the English version, but this is the first fully foreign language or non-English language release by Indicator. So that's kind of maybe a good sign that Indicator might actually be releasing some non-English language films at a later point. Again, with their limited edition releases, you get a poster, you get a booklet. Here's a very young Gaspar Noe. He has more facial hair now. And again, it has essays. There's a piece by Mark Kermode, who wrote a famous review of the film at the time. It is a really good package. It's a 2-disc Blu-ray. You have the theatrical cut, which went in reverse, and then you have the straight cut, which actually goes in chronological order from the end of the first one to the end to the start instead of start to the end. There is a commentary with Noe. There is a 44-minute retrospective documentary with Noe, Monica Belucci, Vincent Cassel, Albert Dupontel, cinematographer, and others, which is very good. A lot of people hate this film. A lot of people view it as a masterpiece. I'm somewhere in the middle. I thought it was good, but not amazing, and not, absolutely terrible. But we'll get to that at a later point. But that documentary where Noe and people actually explain the genesis of the film, you can make the argument it's almost more interesting than the film, but that's maybe being a little bit cynical. You've got an NFT 50 Q&A from 2002 for 49 minutes with an audio recording with Noe, Belucci and Cassel. A BFI masterclass with Gaspar Noe from 2009, which is 90 minutes, which again is an audio interview. There's a piece on the special effects in the film. There is a wonderful little visual essay, 15 minutes, Time Destroys All Things, examining the two versions of Irreversible by Alexandra Heller Nicholas, who wrote Rape Revenge Films, A Critical Study. There's 1 minute of a deleted scene. You have 2 Gaspar Noe music videos. You also have a 2002 5-minute documentary called Intoxication by Noe, featuring filmmaker Stefan Drouot. You have the 2019 Venice Film trailer, and obviously you have a booklet. So if you like Irreversible, I would certainly highly recommend the package, because it is a wonderful package. Now the film itself, Gaspar Noe originally wanted to make a kind of Eyes Wide Shut with this famous couple, Belucci and Cassel, and have kind of them having sex essentially, but that kind of morphed over time and became Irreversible. He wanted to do, it was going to end up being like a romantic triangle film with like explicit sex and things like that, but he kind of eventually morphed it into a rape revenge film, or revenge rape, as it goes from the end to the start. But because it is a revenge rape film, not a rape revenge film, interesting things do occur when you're watching the film, because a lot of times in rape revenge films, or somebody gets killed and somebody goes on a revenge rampage, like John Wick or something like that, the audience at times is part of that catharsis of, the bad people get their just rewards, whether that's they get sent to prison, or if you want to be more morally dubious, they get punished or killed at the end. There is something cathartic about that on some level. But because Irreversible starts with somebody at the end of the film being brutally killed, you don't know why that has happened, so you look at it completely differently than you would if we had the attack at the start and then that at the end, because it would be building to that. Whereas the film just starts as an assault on the senses. Noe wanted the end of the film to pretty much just be about men and have no women in it whatsoever, so it is set in a hardcore gay sex club. It's shot in neon red. It's actually quite difficult to tell what the hell's going on. Pretty much at the start and the end of every scene, he kind of rotates the camera up to the ceiling, or up to the sky. So the start of the film is very disorientating, and you can see why when it was shown at Cannes, people kind of walked out after the first 10 minutes. It's very much like Takashi Miike's Dead or Alive, which just has that hyper-kinetic opening 10 minutes or so, and you just think, if the rest of the film is like this, I'm not sure I'll be able to watch it. You kind of get that same feeling with the start of Irreversible. It's kind of like, I'm not sure I can actually take this if the rest of the film is like this. Obviously the rest of the film settles down a bit, but it's just hyper-kinetic. You don't really know who's who, which of course is a major plot point to the start of the film. Vincent Cassel's character is acting like a horrible human being. He is homophobic. He gives an Asian taxi driver lots of racist abuse, but we'll get to the characterizations later. So again, you're wondering obviously what's causing this, and then we realise as it goes back, it's because his girlfriend has been raped and he's looking for the person who did it. But again, because Noe starts at the end, you just think this person is a terrible person. Again, you can make the argument, you should leave it to the authorities rather than going. But again, he's approached by these guys after the event to say, oh, we can find this and take care of it, rather than getting to take care of the police. So we kind of, we see the aftermath, and then we see the attack, and then we see the hunt for the guy, and then of course we get to Monica Bellucci's character Alex being raped in an underpass. Now this rape is nasty and horrible, as it should be. There's nothing worse than rapes that are shot in films and there's kind of cutaways and they edit it, and whereas Noe just wanted people to endure the rape for the 9 minutes that it lasts. The camera, which has been hyperactive and on amphetamines for most of the first half of the film, is just locked on the ground. As an audience, you can't look away, there's no cuts, you're firmly with Monica Bellucci, you're not with the attacker, which again some films do that with rapes, you're kind of from the attacker's point of view, whereas here you're strictly with the victim and you have no choice but to sit there for 9 minutes as she's being raped. There is a kind of nice detail as we see a passerby walk into the underpass. Again, we don't know who it is, and then they just leave again, because as the famous study says, if women are being sexually assaulted or raped, if they shout rape, generally nobody comes, whereas if they shout fire, people are more inclined to actually come and help. So I think that's a very truthful moment, the fact that people will generally run away from this when they see violence in the street or somebody being attacked. They won't necessarily run to help and try and be a hero. Human nature, there is a fight or flight response. The rape is horrible, but it should be. There shouldn't be, in some films, rapes are done in a kind of almost titillating fashion, whereas there's just none of that, so you have to give no credit for that. It's literally, you're going to sit and watch this and there's not any distractions, the camera is locked on the floor and that is it. So you have to give them credit for that. And then we go back and Vincent Cassel's character, Marcus, and Albert Dupontel's character, Pierre, who is Alex's ex. They're at a party. Vincent Cassel's obviously on some form of drug, and Monica Bellucci falls out with him and goes home, and that's when she's attacked. And then it kind of settles down to them going to the party. There's a overly long scene on the subway where Pierre's pretty much asking Alex and Marcus whether Marcus can make her come, which is just quite tedious, to be honest. It's funny because after the rape, which is the scenes before the rape, it's really not that interesting at all. Again, there's kind of explicit sex between Cassel and Belucci. There's a slight plot point which I won't go into, and then we end the film on a beautiful little scene with Monica Bellucci reading a book in the park, a book on time, strangely enough, and then it ends with this strobe effect sky, which people have kind of said, the film starts with death and ends with literally birth being thrown into the sky. Again, people with epilepsy or who suffer from seizures, that there probably should be a warning on the start of the film, or sorry, the end of the film, because the strobe effect is actually quite hard on the eyes. There's actually a couple of scenes in the film where if you do suffer from epilepsy or seizures, it's it's very strobe heavy. So all in all, for me, it's a good film. Again, him talking about it and what he was trying to achieve might actually be more interesting than the film. So for me, it's not an absolute piece of trash, and it's not a masterpiece. For me, it's a good film with the interesting idea of going backwards to the start, because we hear about the rape before we see the rape. When that scene begins, you do kind of feel tense because you know what's coming, whereas obviously in the straight cut it's a surprise because you don't know. Obviously you're going to see the theatrical cut before you watch the straight cut, because the straight cut was only made fairly recently, so you're obviously going to know what's happened. But if you pretend that you live in a vacuum and you've never seen the theatrical cut, then the rape would come as just this shocking episode in the middle of the film, whereas in the theatrical cut you know it's coming. So there's, by doing it from the back to the front, there is some interesting narrative things that we're used to that are kind of flipped, and how we feel about things like revenge films if you actually see the revenge at the start of the film. Obviously it's not the first time this kind of thing's been done. They do reference a Harold Pinter play which had that same kind of format. I mean, this is the first Noe film I've seen. I'm not really going to be in a rush to see any of his other ones, but I might see them at some point. I mean, to me, you have to give him some credit for at least trying something different. And you could argue, from what I've heard, quite a lot of his films are just there to poke and prod and provoke. But that's not a bad thing. I mean, when you consider how many films you've watched in your life, especially in the film community, and how many of those films are completely forgettable in one ear and out the other, and yes, there's a place for that, but certainly Irreversible isn't a film that you're going to forget. I mean, for me, the big weakness are the characters, because they're just not engaging, and I think that's one of the reasons I only gave it a 3 out of 5. If the characters had been more engaging, you would probably care a bit more. I mean, obviously you care about Monica Bellucci's character, but Vincent Cassel's character is just not engaging or likeable in any way. Albert Dupontel's character isn't interesting or engaging or likeable in any way, and it's interesting because somebody on the retrospective documentary says that Noe doesn't like writing, and you can kind of see that. He said himself he kind of had 13 scenes when he was doing the script. I think they actually sold the film on the basis of there's 3 pages of script, and you can kind of tell that writing isn't his strong point. There's a lot of improvisation. For example, the scene on the subway, which for me could have been about 2 minutes long, but I think it's about 12 minutes, and a lot of that is just a static camera as well. So the camera does go hyperactive at the start of the film, like I said, very much like Mickey's Dead or Alive, but then there's other scenes where he just sits it. So for me, it's only, what is it, about 98 minutes long. It probably could have been 88 minutes long, and the writing, because most of it was improvised, I mean, I know actors seem to like improvisation sometimes, but I think I would actually prefer a really good script. And one of the flaws of Irreversible is it doesn't have a very good script as far as dialogue, and that to me hurts the characterization because they're not really engaging. So again, in the same way that Noe is kind of just witnessing the events, you feel he's not engaged in it. He keeps a distance, and the fact that at the end of scenes he rotates up to the sky or the ceiling, it's almost like there's a distance between the filmmaker and the actual subject matter. So again, it's not engaging. So for me, for this to be higher rated, I think you would have to have better writing, better characterization, and actually feel the director was engaged himself. I mean, again, I don't know what his other films are like, whether he has that distance as well. But I just kind of, that was my feelings on it anyway. But an interesting film. Again, if you're a fan of it, I would certainly recommend the Indicator edition. And again, hopefully it means Indicator might be releasing more non-English language films in the future. Yeah, so that's my take on Irreversible. Please let me know your take. I know it is still a controversial film, but to me it's not a complete piece of trash, and it's not a masterpiece either. It's right in the middle. Again, not a film I would watch very often, strangely enough, but certainly it's worth having a little discussion about, unlike certain other quote unquote shocking films or controversial films, like a Serbian film, for example. I don't think that's even worth really talking about. So thanks very much for watching. Again, please let me know in the comments below what your take on Irreversible is, or if you'd recommend any other Gaspar Noe films. And hopefully you'll join me again for more random reviews. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying thanks very much for watching, and farewell.